Okay, I've got 9:32, and my wife has reminded me twice now, in 5 minutes, to repeat my questions, to repeat your questions if you ask a question. Because apparently this is uploaded online. Cody says you can hear me just fine, but you can't really hear the questions. So sometimes I'll be responding to a question, and the listener online will be wondering what in the world the question was. But yeah, if you're a smart person, you can figure out what the question was by what the answer is, right?
Yeah, that's what I did.
For example, if I say, George Washington, then you know that, okay, father of our country, first president.
But your questions aren't always that,
No, they're not. You're right. Correct.
Clear cut.
Not in a theology class.
There could be various answers.
Well, just to let you know where we've come from, where we're going, we've covered theology proper. Theology proper is the study of God. The word theology itself just means knowledge of God. But the term is used to generally describe all aspects of biblical knowledge and all facets of demonology, ecclesiology, angelology, Christology, et cetera, pneumatology. So theology proper means that's focusing just on God. We covered that. Then we covered bibliology, our Bible. Where did it come from? What's its benefit? Is it really the Word of God, et cetera, et cetera? And this week we're going to cover angelology. And then the next time we meet, which will be after the holidays, we'll cover Satanology and demonology. So that's kind of where we're heading, and I think Christology is after that. So
we're going to do 4 pages today?
Yes.
You're going to be talking fast.
No, not really. I don't think so. Not any faster than normal.
Before you start, I have a question. Okay, so we break apart things and put it like little compartments, like you said, bibliology, Christology, all these things. Do you think that hinders us sometimes? Because obviously they don't do that. It didn't seem to be taught that way to the Jews.
Okay.
This is about Jesus, this is about Jesus, this is about Jesus, this is. Do they? I don't.
Okay, Cody. Okay, so just for the online audience, the impertinent question was. No, the question was, because we study theology in a topical-based manner, does that sometimes perhaps hinder us from seeing broader pictures and themes? Is that a fair? I think it can, but I think the reverse is also true, and that is that if you can't study it all at once. We don't have enough time or resources to really paint the picture broadly. But I think that once you get the parts to understand each part, you can see how it fits together. So I think actually, maybe to the contrary, it actually helps. I think there's a Dwayne. I got a hand. I'm glad you're here. We're covering angels this morning, and this is an interesting topic because angels have their own presence in our culture that's unrelated to Scripture oftentimes, especially this time of year. If you watch A Wonderful Life, you got Clarence, right, the angel, and you've got angels and demons and just all things infused within our culture about the existence of angels and are they real or not? And I think there's a kind of looking at the existence of angels. Do they really exist? Are they real creatures? Because in our Western left brain mindset, it's kind of hard to wrap our minds around something we can't see, feel, touch, whatever. Although apparently Davis had an encounter with an angel this week.
Yes, did.
Strangely enough. And I'll let you tell that in a minute. But it's hard to believe in the supernatural in our world because we're such a practical, evidence-based culture. But as we're going to see, though, the Bible teaches the existence of angels just unequivocally. There's no question about it. And so if we grab the Bible and hold on to it and believe it teaches truth, which is why we have bibliology before we have angelology, then we have to understand that angels are real, in spite of the Western bias and anti-intellectual bias that people live with. And from a human knowledge standpoint, which I guess is the first topic here on the we can neither prove nor disprove the existence of angels from simple human knowledge, I don't think. I mean, I guess Davis can have a testimony, but there's no scientific mechanism or machine or testing device we can use to test the existence or non-existence of angels. So everything we know about angels, I think, has to come from the Scriptures themselves. Make sense? And so, in the scriptures, like I said, unequivocally teach the existence of angels. The Old Testament refers to angels about 100 times, and the New Testament about 165 times. And of the 165 times in the New Testament, about 65 times it's in Revelation alone, but still 100 times they're completely unrelated to Revelation. And they're mentioned throughout the Bible, all over the place. They're mentioned in Genesis, they're mentioned in Revelation, and every place in between. So there's not a particular epoch or era that the angels or their presence or their ministry is confined to. They're equally present in both Testaments. And even Jesus himself teaches the existence of angels. And so if we fail to believe that there are such things as angels, then we are basically rejecting Jesus' direct teaching on the subject. So to give you some examples in the Old Testament about angels, they always appear as real existing creatures. There are 34 times that they're referred to in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. For example, in Genesis 18, I could give you more examples, but I'll give you some. In Genesis 18, Abraham is sitting there, and angels appear to him, and he eats with them, and they tell him about the birth of Isaac. So they appear as objective, real creatures. Although, as we're going to see, they don't always have a body. Sometimes they seem to be spiritual and not corporeal. You also have multiple references in the Old Testament to the angel of Yahweh, whom we've taught and believe is the pre-incarnate Christ. And the word angel itself just means messenger, both in the Hebrew and the Greek. In 2 Samuel chapter 24, verse 16, after David wrongly conducts a census of the people, an angel comes and stretches out his hands and destroys the Jews, or a lot of Jews. So they obviously have a very real corporeal presence because they kill people. It's God's judgment on David for disobeying and taking a census. Yeah, what does corporeal mean? It means having a body. Incorporeal is without body. Corporeal is having a body. Corpulent is having a lot of body, being fat. So anyway, you also have Isaiah refers to seraphim in chapter 6, verse 2. The seraphim stood above him, above God, each having 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, 2 he covered his feet, and 2 he flew. You have cherubim referred to in Ezekiel chapter 10, verses 1 through 3. Daniel mentions angels twice, 2 different angels. He mentions Gabriel in chapter 9, verse 20 through 27, when Gabriel comes and brings an answer to David's prayer request, basically. That's David, I mean Daniel's prayer request. And then there's the archangel Michael's referred to in Daniel 10:13 and Daniel 12:1. And they do specific things. When Gabriel comes, I mean, he just describes Daniel's while he's speaking and praying. Then the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision previously, came to me and started telling him stuff. And Michael, same thing, comes to Daniel, answers questions also. Zechariah mentions angels frequently. In Zechariah chapter 1, they're referred to as agents of God. And in the first 6 chapters of Zechariah, they are frequently the beings that come and interpret visions that Zechariah is having. They provide information to him. Here, you had a dream, Zechariah, or a vision. Here's what it means. But the angels are the messengers who bring the meaning of the vision. And also in the Psalms, for example, the angels are people who worship God. For example, Psalm 34:7. The angels of the Lord encamp around those who fear Him, and He rescues them. So He also rescues people. Famously in Psalm 91:11, for He will give His angels charge over you. If you remember that song, Jehovah Jireh cares for you. Psalm 103:20, bless the Lord, you His angels, mighty in strength, you perform His word. So the Psalms show the angels as those who worship God and also delivers God's people from harm over and over again. And what we're going to see, the New Testament does the same. In Hebrews 1:14, the author of Hebrews refers to angels as ministering servants sent to minister to people. That's where you get the idea of a guardian angel, basically. So in the New Testament, over and over and over again, angels come up. topically, in Matthew 2:19, an angel appears to Joseph and tells him it's okay to come back from Egypt after Herod died. In Mark 1:13, when Jesus is in the wilderness for 40 days being tempted by Satan, after the temptations are over with, the angels come and minister to Jesus after his temptation. I mean very real, corporeal, real things. And of course, Jesus was the only person who was present in the wilderness, right, when all this happened. So he must be the source of the information that Mark puts in his gospel. And so if it didn't really happen, then Jesus was the one to blame for the misinformation. Luke 2:13, famously, the multitude of angels appear to the shepherds after they announce the birth of the Messiah, and they, glory to God in the highest, peace on earth, goodwill towards men. In John chapter 20, verse 12, when Mary Magdalene comes to find the body of Jesus, she finds two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been laying. She describes something very real. Acts chapter 1, verses 10 and 11. As the disciples are watching Jesus ascend into heaven, behold, there are two men standing beside him, men of Galilee. Why do you stand looking into the sky? This Jesus has been taken from you up into heaven, will come in just the same way as you've watched him go into heaven. So, the angels are giving information there to the disciples. Paul refers frequently to angels. In Galatians 3:19, he talks about the angels as being the ones who were involved in giving the law. I'll just read it to you. Why the law then? It was added because of transgression, having been ordained through the angels by the agency of a mediator until the seed would come to whom the promise had been made. So Paul's talking about Abraham as being involved in the giving of the law. And then you have in 1 Timothy 5:21, when Paul was giving his charge to Timothy, he says, I solemnly charge you in the presence of God and of Jesus Christ and of his chosen angels. So obviously Paul believed that they were real. Here you go. Daniel, sorry. The writer of Hebrews refers to angels in several places, talking about Jesus having become as much better than the angels as he has inherited a more excellent name than they, talking about the Christ, obviously. Do what?
Which chapter and verse is that?
Hebrews 1:4. Peter says something about a neat thing about angels in 1 Peter 1:12. He's talking about the gospel. He says, it was revealed to them that they were not serving, actually talking about the prophets in the Old Testament. It was revealed to them that they were not serving themselves, but you in these things which have now been announced to you, talking about the gospel, for those who preach the gospel to you by the Holy Spirit sent from heaven, things into which angels long to look. And what Peter's saying is that from the sin of Adam and Eve till now, angels have been wanting to try to figure out how God was going to restore his creation. And the angels longed to know, but never got to know what God's plan actually was. That's
1 Peter what?
1:12. And finally, there's a reference in Jude there's only one chapter in Jude, but Jude verse 6, talking about the angels who did not keep their own domain, but abandoned their proper abode. He has kept the eternal bonds under darkness for the judgment of the great day, talking about, obviously, demons, fallen angels. So the New Testament speaks of it, and Christ himself, is all balled up in the ministry of angels. We talked about the Mark passage, which is also found in Matthew 4:11. Jesus taught about the resurrection, and how will people be in their resurrection? Remember the Sadducees came to Jesus and says, man's married, he dies, his brother marries her because he's supposed to, and he dies, and so you have 7 brothers. When they get to heaven, whose wife is she going to be? And Jesus says in Matthew chapter 22, verse 30, he says, find it here real quick. For in the resurrection they neither marry, meaning us, nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. So angels are obviously created beings in heaven, but they don't procreate. So angels will also be the ones who separate the wicked from the righteous at the end of the age. In Matthew 13:39, in the parable of the wheat and tares, the enemy who sowed them is the devil, and the harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. He's explaining what happened. Remember the parable of the wheat and the tares? You have wheat, somebody comes in and sows weeds, tares in there, and they look a lot alike, but you can't really tell which is which until they're fully ripe. And Jesus, they ask him, well, should we go in and tear up the field? No, don't worry about that. The angels will take care of separating the righteous from the unrighteous at the end of the age. So they have Jesus taught about them. And also, Jesus tells us that when the Son of Man comes, this is in Matthew 25:31, and all the angels with him, they will sit on his glorious throne. So when Christ comes back, he won't be by himself. There will be angels that accompany him. And people who want to reject the supernatural, and in our culture there are a lot who want to reject the supernatural. They might still want to, though, hold on to the Bible as teaching some truth. And so the question is, well, how can you say there are no angels, but when you read about the teaching of Jesus, you have to reject Jesus' teaching to say there are no such things. And some of those critics talk about Jesus being deceived. He was deceived. He actually believed they existed, but he was wrong. Others would say that Jesus just conformed his teachings to conform to the ignorant people of the age, and because the ignorant people of the age believed in angels, he taught that to help them understand what's going on.
So he lied to teach the truth.
Exactly, which is an odd circumstance. But some of his references, though, you really just can't. For example, Matthew 18:10, talking about the guardian angels also, see that you do not despise one of these little ones, children, for I say to you that their angels in heaven continually see the face of my Father who's in heaven. I mean, you just can't you can't say that's he's teaching an absolute truth that has to do with God. And also, when Christ is on the cross, in Matthew 26:53. Or do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? That was on the cross. It's actually before the cross. But so his rescuers are real. I mean, he doesn't just make them up. So perhaps the actual best alternative is to simply believe that they're real, the way Jesus taught them.
Well, that's even throughout the Old Testament too. It was always just matter-of-factly stated, and they moved on.
Yep.
It was just boom. There's an angel. This happened.
Yep.
No qualms about it.
Yeah, they didn't have the trouble with us trying to wrap our minds around it. The creation of angels, they're created beings. Psalm 148 verse 5, 148 verse 2 refers to angels. 148 verse 5 says, "Let them praise the name of the Lord, for He commanded, and they were created." So they aren't eternity past. They're created beings like we are. And I said a second ago from Matthew 22:30, they don't procreate. So however many angels there are, they've all been in existence since the time that they were first created. Unlike people, where we have children, grandchildren. They're from the point that they were created going forward, they're eternal. They're eternal going backwards, like Jesus and God are. So,
but from the point they were created.
Correct, and we're going to see some verses that deal directly with that. How were they created? Great question. In John chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. We learn that Jesus created all things, right? And all things came into being through him, and apart from him, nothing came into being that's come into being. And of course, we know that all things is that hyper-technical theological word that means all things, right? So, but also you have in Colossians chapter 1, verse 16, Paul confirms it as well, where Paul says, "For by him," referring to Jesus, "all things were created, both in the heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him." The references to thrones, dominions, rulers, and authorities it's a reference to angelic beings, and we're going to see that here in a minute. So they were created, and they were also created holy. When God finished His creation in Genesis 1:31, He of course said that everything was, eventually very good, right? So the angels were originally holy beings, and he refers to them sometimes as holy angels. For example, in Mark 8:38, "For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." Right? You have in 1 Timothy 5:21, they're the elect angels. They're the elect angels. "I solemnly charge you in the presence of God and of Christ Jesus and of his chosen angels to maintain these principles without bias, doing nothing in a spirit of partiality." That's Paul's charge to Timothy. 1 Timothy 5:21. And that's to be contrasted with the angels who followed Satan, which are referred to in Matthew 25:41. "Then he will say also to those who on the left, 'Depart from me, cursed ones, into the eternal fire which has been prepared for the devil and His angels, exactly. What kind of beings are angels? Well, they're creatures. They're distinct from human beings, but they have power, knowledge, activity. They do things that living things do. For example, in Hebrews 1:14, as I said earlier, are they not all, referring to angels, ministering spirits sent out to render service for the sake of those who will inherit salvation? So they have a job. In 1 Corinthians 6:3, Paul tells us that we get to judge the angels. Do you not know that we will judge angels? Born-again believers will be judging angels. What that looks like, I have no clue. I mean, and what are we going to judge them based on? Because I don't know anything about any of them. But at some point in time, I guess we'll have enough information to make a discernment about whether they're real or not.
I mean, we have Christ in us, and our bodies are made perfect at some point, so maybe that has something to do with it.
Mm-hmm. But although they're creatures, they're limited in terms of their power and their knowledge and their activity. As we saw a second ago in 1 Peter 1:11 and 12, the angels sought to know what person or time the Spirit of Christ within them was indicating as he predicted the sufferings of Christ and the glories to follow. It was revealed to them, they're referring to the prophets, that they were not serving themselves but you in these things which now have been announced to you through those who preach the gospel to you by the Holy Spirit sent from heaven, things into which angels long to look. They didn't know how God was going to redeem His creation. They aren't omniscient. Activity-wise, so anyway, they're not eternal. They're limited. The nature of angels here, like I said, they're personalities, and by personalities, creatures with personalities, it means that they have emotion, will, intellect, intelligence, that kind of stuff. So let me give you a couple of verses to kind of explain that here. For example, the good angels and Satan and demons possess intelligence. Matthew 8:29, when Jesus was going to cast out the demons from the Gerasene demoniac, they cried out in fear, saying, "What business do you have with us, O Son of Man? Have you come here to torment us before our time?" Showing that they have intelligence, that Jesus is here, something's going on, but they also express fear about what Jesus is going to do, so they have emotions. 2 Corinthians 11:3, talking about the Corinthians, I'm afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, referring, of course, to Satan. So the angels can be crafty. Satan's a crafty guy. He's sneaky. And again, also, they have intelligence. That 1 Peter 1:12 verse I referred to, the things into which angels long to look. Angels, Satan and demons also demonstrate that they have wills. For example, in Luke chapter 8 verse 28, in Luke's version of the casting out of the Gerasene demoniac, the demons say, "What business do you have with each other, Jesus? Do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." I mean, they express a desire for something to happen. Do not torment us. Then he commands them to go out of the guy into the pigs. In 2 Timothy 2:26, referring to people who have come under the control or the influence of Satan, talking about, these are, I guess, there are two men in 2 Timothy who are thorns in Paul's side, and he says something, pray they may come to their senses and escape from the snare of the devil, having been held captive by him to do his will. Meaning, so Satan was crafty, he snared them, and they want them to do Satan's will. So they have personality. Angels do not have omniscience. We've seen the 1 Peter 1:12 reference. Another reference is Matthew 24:36, talking about the second coming of Christ. But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven. So they don't know when Christ is coming back. They do have they're spirit beings. They have personality. They're personalities, but they're also spirit beings. They're referred to frequently as spirit beings, and so we're going to look at. Sometimes they're corporeal, and sometimes they're spirit-like. So, in the Hebrews 1:14 passage, they're referred to as ministering spirits. And of course, spirits are not substantive things. They're incorporeal. They're pneuma. They're like breath, in which I came, in that familiar passage. And Satan is referred to in Ephesians 2:2 as a spirit that's now working in the sons of disobedience. I just quoted the last clause in that sentence. So they're spiritual. And if they're spiritual, then they're also immaterial and corporeal. So you have this sort of duality that sometimes they have a physical presence, but other times they are completely spiritual.
That shouldn't be too hard for us to grasp because, well, I say hard to grasp, but, Jesus is man and Jesus is God. And we say that very matter of fact, in our teachings. So it shouldn't be too far-fetched that these things can be spiritual and not spiritual at the same time.
And I think sometimes, if they're simply spiritual, of course, it's hard for us to gauge their influence. I mean, maybe we can. But reading the Bible, sometimes when they have a physical presence, they're there for a specific mission, right? They appear to Abraham in Genesis 18 to explain to him about the birth of Isaac. And they sit and they eat with him. And so if they're eating with him, they have a physical presence. Something incorporeal wouldn't be eating. You also have in Ephesians 6:12, Paul talks about, after talking about our spiritual armor, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, physical things, but against rulers, powers, the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. So there's a very real struggle that we're all fighting with spiritual forces that influence our world. Most of the time, the angels appear as males, but not always, strangely enough. Zechariah chapter 5, verse 9, Zechariah says this, I lifted up my eyes and looked, and there were two women were coming out of the wind in their wings, and they had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heavens. Obviously, he's describing seeing angelic beings. They have wings. So that'd be female.
What would be the purpose of, because they don't propagate, right?
Correct.
So what would be the purpose of sexual dimorphism?
The question is, what would be the purpose of having different sexes of angels if they don't procreate? And that's a God question. I don't know the answer to it. And it might very well be in Zechariah, when he described two women, maybe they were just effeminate men or transgender men or something. I don't know. It was a joke. Sorry.
Do you think, though, that God, depending on who they're speaking to, they maybe are in a form of human, in a corporal form, because that person would not understand. Maybe they understand when they're talking to someone. Maybe it has more to do with the person that they're speaking to than their own.
Could very well be, giving them. If a angel appeared as a talking bookcase, that would confuse people. Sometimes angels appear in dreams. In Matthew 1:20, you have an angel appeared to Joseph. Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your child. So the angel there didn't appear physically, but it was in a dream. Then, of course, you have Isaiah's famous vision in Isaiah chapter 6, verses 1 through 8, where he sees God on the throne in heaven, and he's surrounded by the seraphim and the angels, and it's in a vision. Sometimes angels are present, and we don't know it, but their presence is unveiled. In Elisha, in 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 17, the Arameans are trying to capture Elisha, and they aren't having any success because God is thwarting their efforts. And so finally, Elisha wants the people to see what influences are keeping them from capturing him. And so Elisha prayed and said, "O Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see." And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. So they were there, and Elisha prayed so his servant could see what God was doing on their behalf, which would be a remarkable thing, wouldn't it? And sometimes, like we've already talked about, they appear to people in a normal, conscious, waking state. Again, Genesis 19, the two angels came to Sodom in the evening as Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. And the angels just talked to Sodom, and he invites them in for the evening. You have Mark 16:5, on the day of the resurrection. Entering the tomb, they saw a young man, we know to be an angel, sitting at the right, wearing a robe, and they were amazed. You have in Luke 2:13, you have all suddenly there appeared with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host praising God and saying. So sometimes they're purely spiritual. Sometimes they're there in visions and dreams. Sometimes they're there and they're revealed for Elisha's special prayer, and sometimes they appear physical. So they appear in all kinds of ways. They also are often described as having superhuman characteristics. For example, Daniel chapter 10, verses 5 through 7. I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there was a certain man dressed in linen, whose waist was girded with a belt of pure gold. His body was like beryl. His face had the appearance of lightning. His eyes were like flaming torches. His arms and feet were like gleam of polished bronze, etc., etc. So sometimes when they appear physically, they appear in a superhuman form, I'll say. In Revelation chapter 10, verses 1 through 3, same thing. You have an angel coming down out of heaven, clothed with a cloud, and the rainbow was upon his head, and his face was like the sun, and his feet were like pillars of fire. I mean, a very interesting description, to say the least, but it was not, again, sort of superhuman. And as we talked about earlier, some angels have wings. You have the seraphim in Isaiah 6:2. They have 6 wings. In Ezekiel 1:5 through 8, the figures, the 4 living beings that he describes, they're the angels, they have wings there also. So sometimes they have wings and sometimes they don't. We talked about this earlier. The number of angels will never change. The angels don't propagate baby angels. That's Matthew 22:30. But also in Luke chapter 20, verse 36, they don't die.
Which one is that?
Luke chapter 20, verse 36, where Jesus is talking about, for they cannot die anymore because they are like angels. He equates them to eternal, and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. But the wicked angels, of course, will be punished in a place of separation from God. Matthew 25:41, depart from me, accursed ones, into the eternal fire, which has been prepared for the devil and his angels. So there's an eternal punishment there. And when he casts out the demon in Luke chapter 8, verse 31, they implored Jesus not to command them to go away into the abyss. And of course, he sends them into the pigs instead. The pigs run off the cliff into the sea. So they are immortal, and actually they are a higher class of creatures than men for now. How do we know that? In Hebrews chapter 2, verses 7 through 9, the author of Hebrews is describing Jesus, and he says, you have made him, meaning Jesus, for a little while lower than the angels. You've crowned him with glory and honor and appointed him over the works of your hands, etc., etc. So, verse 9, but we see him who was made, meaning Jesus, for a little while lower than the angels. So, if Jesus, when he became a man, is lower than the angels, then it stands to reason that we too are lower than the angels, but only for now. And we're going to see that that'll change. And we note that they were all originally holy beings, because in Genesis chapter 1, verse 31, God saw all that he made, and it was very good. So that has to include angels as well. And 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4 says, for if God did not spare angels when they sinned, meaning that they were holy, then they sinned and got cast in the pit of darkness. So they were originally holy beings. And we're going to see a little bit this week about Satan and his angels, but we're going to reserve more attention and focus to demons and Satanology next time. Let's see here. Angels are stronger than we are, and 2 Peter 2:11 talks about whereas angels, who are greater in might and power than we are, do not bring a reviling judgment against the Lord. Again, they don't procreate, and man will judge the angels. So we'll get a chance to assess their holiness. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 3. Again, I don't have any idea what that looks like, but it's nonetheless rather clearly taught. Where are we here? We're on the organization of the angels. What do you think about that? How are they organized? In how many angels are there? Well, Revelation 5:11 says that there are a number of them, myriads of myriads, which is a Hebrew way of saying they're uncountable. They're a number we can't count, multiplied by a number we can't count, however many that is. And also Hebrews 12:22 also refers to the myriad of angels. So they're uncountable, basically. Some people are going to want to come to the conclusion that there are at least as many angels as there have been human beings throughout history, and they base that upon Matthew chapter 18, verse 10, where Jesus is talking to the Pharisees and said, "Do not despise one of these little ones," talking about children, "for I say to you that their angels in heaven continually see the face of my Father who's in heaven." Does that actually say that there's the exact number of angels is at least the number of people who ever lived? No, it doesn't say it, but that's what people will argue that based upon that verse. Might be true, might not be true. But we know that they're organized because in Psalm 89, verse 5, and also in verse 7, they're referred to as assemblies and councils. So they seem to have some organization to them. You have them being organized for battle in Revelation 12:7. You have Michael and his angels waging war with the dragon and his angels. So there's some organizational aspect to them. In Ephesians 3:10, Paul talks about the manifold wisdom of God might now be made known through the church to the rulers and the authorities in the heavenly places. And the rulers and the authorities in heavenly places are angels. So there's some organization where they're hierarchical, which is where C.S. Lewis, if you've read the Screwtape Letters, have you ever read it before? It's a good book, but you have a man who's struggling with temptation and things, and there's a demon who is sent to influence him towards negative things, but he was sent by his uncle, who's kind of over him, right? So that's maybe where C.S. Lewis got his idea. You also have It's a Wonderful Life. You have Clarence the angel, and who's the angel over Clarence? And, huh?
I think it's Michael.
No.
Gabriel?
No. Clarence is the angel with Jimmy Stewart, but he talks to me. He talks to.
Did you ever know the name of him, or just?
No, I think he help me when he's. I remember his name anyway, but again, I'm mixing stuff here. In Ephesians 6:12, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, powers, world forces of darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. Paul seems to stratify them in terms of some sense of organization. So how are they exactly organized? We don't have a whole lot of information about that, but we have some information. But they're also ranked. There is one archangel named in the Bible, and his name is Michael, yeah. In Jude 9, in this obscure passage Jude's interesting because in Jude 9, when he says this, he makes a statement of fact that raises a million questions that nobody ever answers for us. It says, Michael the archangel, when he was disputing with the devil and argued about the body of Moses. What? So Michael and Satan are fighting over the body of Moses. Well, I want more information. I mean, tell me. In 1 Thessalonians 4:16, the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. So the Bible doesn't refer to specifically to any other archangels, but he does refer to other high-ranking angels. For example, in Daniel chapter 10, verse 13, talking about the prince of the kingdom of Persia this is Gabriel talking. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia was withstanding me for 21 days. Then behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I've been left there with the kings of Persia. So Gabriel is saying, I was delayed in coming to you, Daniel, to answer your prayer by the kings of Persia, other high-ranking demonic beings. So Michael had to come help me, free me from my fight, so that I could come to you and answer your prayer and your question. So you have sometimes the higher-ranking angels, like, for example, again, Daniel 10:13, referred to as the chief princes. Some obviously it's referring to a superior group of angels. There's a couple of weeks ago when we were doing the canon of Scripture, we talked about the 14 apocryphal books. Do you remember that? And the Apocrypha, of course, are the 14 books that sit between the Old Testament and the New Testament that Protestants reject as being part of the Bible, but which the Roman Catholics include in their Bible. And there's a book in the Apocrypha called the Book of Enoch, and he names Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Jeremiah, and Uriel as the principal angels who are privileged to stand before the throne of God. Is it true or not? Don't know. I mean, Enoch he might have, been smoking weed and just had a vision or something. But at least there's a reference there to those five, and also that same book also references 7 angels as archangels. Again, but it's not in the canon of Scripture, so we don't want to really place too much emphasis on it. But if you go to a Catholic church, then that's information that they would say is accurate information.
Do the Jews view that stuff as their history instead of Scripture?
I think it depends upon which 14 books you're talking about here, because clearly some of the Apocrypha are historical stuff. They talk about the Maccabees, and the Maccabees were Jewish people who sought to restore Israel back to its pre-Nebuchadnezzar destruction, the one to reinstitute the temple sacrifices and restore the law. And so a lot of the Apocrypha are dealing with definitely historical matters that we think are probably pretty accurate. But not all of them are. Some of them deal with spiritual things too, like Enoch, for example.
I mean, one of their holidays is based off of that event, right?
Yep, it's happening Hanukkah, right, so, which we're having right now. Yep.
I'm saying that they view it as more or less history.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And remember, we talked last time we met, about one reason we don't embrace the Apocrypha as being biblical, and because some of the things that are taught in the Apocrypha are clearly contrary to solid evangelical teaching. For example, and I don't remember which book it is, but I can find out if you want to know, there's a verse that talks about paying money to God in exchange for forgiveness of sins. Which is just directly contrary to salvation by faith alone in Christ alone, the grace gospel. So that's why we reject it too. Is that the theology of some of those books conflicts directly with solid biblical teaching from Jesus and Paul and everybody else. Also, again, we talked about in terms of organization, you have rulers and principalities. Those words are used 7 times by Paul that basically indicate an order of angels that are both evil and good in the universe. Romans 8:38, for example, for I'm convinced that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, there's the word, which is an angelic word. It's referred to in Ephesians 1:21, where Paul is talking about Jesus being raised far above all rule and authority and power and dominion, and every name that is named, not only in this age, but also in the age to come. Again, so that's a reference to angelic beings. So there's some stratification and organization there. If you go over to Ephesians chapter 2, and I don't have the verse here, but I can get it, Paul talks about us being raised with Jesus, also far above all rule and authority as well. So Jesus was made lower than the angels as a man. At the resurrection, he was raised above, going back to the place he formerly inhabited. And at some point in the future, we'll be seated with Christ in the heavenly places, far above all rule and power and authority and dominion. So Jesus he will drag us above them when he redeems us. That general truth is true. What that looks like or exactly how it happens, we just have to find out when it happens, because the Bible doesn't really directly address it. You also have Ephesians 3:10 talking about the gospel, so that the manifold wisdom of God might now be made known through the church to the rulers and authorities in the heavenly places. So we teach the angels something in the church about God. They're watching us. We've already looked at the Ephesians 6:12 passage about our struggle not being against flesh and blood, but against, again, rulers, powers, and world forces of darkness, the spiritual forces of wickedness. Colossians 1:16 also, same thing. For by him, Jesus, all things were created, both in the heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, again, angelic beings. We also have the words power and authority. We've already kind of looked at that. They're strewn throughout the New Testament. I'll give you one verse that I haven't given you, and that's in 1 Peter 3:22, talking about Jesus, who's at the right hand of God, having gone into heaven, after angels and authorities and powers had been subjected to him, mean to Jesus. So, again, that reference. 2 Peter 2:11 does teach that angels and demons have greater power than humans. Talking about the angels who are greater in might and power do not bring a reviling judgment against them before the Lord. So they're powerful. Where do they rule? According to Ephesians 6:12, although they're in the heavenly places, they rule this world. It's called the world of darkness. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, powers, and world forces of this darkness. So they rule here on earth, which makes perfect sense, because in Matthew 4, at the last temptation of Christ, Satan offers Jesus all the kingdoms of this world if Jesus will simply bow down and worship him, right?
Offer them if he didn't have them.
Correct. And so they're his. But so the worldly kingdoms that exist are his to offer. So what do those kingdoms look like? Russia, Hitler's Germany, China's Mao, our America. I mean, I think the United States of America is a worldly kingdom. It's not heaven. It's not the church, and it may be the very best of all worldly kingdoms, but it's still a worldly kingdom. Make no mistake about it.
And hence the reason there needs to be a new earth at the end.
Great point. You're exactly right. And also, we looked at the throne. We already looked at the verses also about thrones and dominions. So I'll give you one other verse here. Jude, verse 8. In the same way, these men, also dreaming, defile the flesh and reject authority and revile angelic majesties. So, and here's a question that you can ask it. You might be able to reason yourself to an answer, but the Bible is not explicit about it. And that is, do these rulers and authorities and powers and dominions, are they related to specific countries and nations in the earth or not? And remember back in Daniel, when Gabriel was delayed, he was fighting the prince of Persia, right? And when I look at what's going on in Iran today, it seems like the Prince of Persia is still alive, doesn't it? I mean, it does. And perhaps there is a strong angelic being that's influencing the leaders of that country. And you can kind of look at other nations in the world and see Hitler. I mean, it seems like, we can't know this for sure, but it seems like the great evil that he produced almost has to be in part coming from a demonic influence that's so strong and powerful that creates such a sense of hate and destruction. That might kind of explain why number one, a young man who was Hitler was a painter. Do you know that? He was a painter. He wasn't a very good one.
Artist painter?
Yeah. He almost starved to death in Vienna before the war, World War I. And of course, Hitler was Austrian, not German, strangely enough. But how can this little obscure guy all of a sudden become the most powerful man on the planet and come within, a whisker's breadth of ruling the world? I mean, did he do it by himself, or was there spiritual power, maybe greater spiritual power than we alone possess, battling behind the scenes?
Also, you should have died like a ton of times.
Yeah.
You escaped death like
Yeah.
a bunch of times.
It explains Mao's China. It explains Pol Pot's Cambodia. It explains a lot about how countries have behaved and acted over the years. Is it true? The Bible doesn't say it exactly that way. But again, you have the Prince of Persia, and you have the worldly forces of spiritual darkness that are waging. So it might make some sense that that's maybe something that happens, that spiritual beings influence nations as well as individuals.
Well, whether it's, like I said, I'm sure you can make the case either way, but the Bible does clearly say that there's powers and authorities happening that are there.
Mm-hmm.
I guess whether we see them or not, and we don't understand it, but something is there that we probably don't see.
And of course, that Ephesians 6:12 passage about our battle's not against flesh and blood; it's against spiritual forces at work in the heavenlies. It feels like it's against flesh and blood, though, when we're confronting Iran or we're confronting Saddam before. I mean, it felt like man on man, right? It did. But behind the physical battle, there's apparently a spiritual battle that also is taking place. And it makes sense to me that if those spiritual forces influence each one of us individually by tempting us and trying to, get us to do things we ought not do, then it can influence other people in a similar way to create a national presence or a spirit of the times. And even in America, there have been, this is my theory, it's not thus saith the Lord, but in America, our history's been characterized by distinct periods of time that seem to have an influence that's nationwide or even more than that. For example, the Roaring 20s, right? And the gay 90s, and you have the 50s, and you have the rebellious 60s. And it seems like there's a spiritual component that kind of influences all of us in a sort of a similar way for a period of time, and then it changes. Is it true? I don't know, but it's my theory that it could be happening, that there's a spiritual quality to life that maybe we just don't see.
Well, it must be powerful enough because Satan offered it to Jesus as like the ultimate gift almost.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't that big of a deal, why would he have offered that?
Right.
So it must be something big and grandiose that we have just zero clue.
Yeah.
It's also, I don't know, just interesting because you think of like all the wars and everything, and you're like, oh, that's just man, trying to, dominate other man. But apparently that is beyond us as well. The spiritual world's going through the same thing. That's something deeper than just a man thing, I guess.
Yep.
It's all through nature.
Yeah, I think.
Above and below, I guess.
I think so. There are two other classifications of angels. You have archangels, you have the powers, rulers, dominions, and authorities. But there are two other that are worth mentioning, and we already mentioned them in passing a minute ago. One is the cherubim, and we know from Ezekiel 28:14 and Ezekiel 28:16 that Satan was a cherub. Before he fell, he was a cherub, and just in Ezekiel 28:14, you, mean Satan, you were the anointed cherub who covers, and I placed you there. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked in the midst of the stones of fire. And then in verse 16, after the fall, by the abundance of your trade, you were internally filled with violence, and you sinned. Therefore, I have cast you as profane from the mountain of God. Talking about Satan there. So he was a cherub at one point in time, and he was booted out of heaven. And you have, interestingly enough, cherubs also guard the Garden of Eden to keep Adam and Eve from going back in Genesis chapter 3, verse 24.
Which is ironic, since Satan's the one.
Yes, exactly. And you have also in the tabernacle and the temple, for example, Exodus 26:1, 1 Kings 6:23 through 29, you have the cherubim both decorate and guard the temple and the tabernacle. So they have this guarding aspect to them where they're watching over the holy places.
This is interesting because you use the word cherub and we think of little bitty cherubs.
Yeah, the Valentine's Day cherub is different than this. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it looks like a sweet little. And these are probably not sweet looking creatures. If they're guarding like that.
Well, and the cherubim also have a future as well. In Ezekiel 41 verses 18 through 20, there are cherubim that are described as guarding or being a part of the millennial temple. Well, what's the millennial temple? If you read Ezekiel, what you find out is that after the Messiah comes back and reigns for 1,000 years, part of what he does when he comes back is reestablishes the temple sacrifices. And I'm kind of going, really? Why? Because Jesus has already paid for it all. Don't know the answer to it. It's one of those obscure things of theology that's there, and we just don't have any good answers. I don't have any good answers for why God would do that. And the best answer I can come up with is that the sacrifices really aren't for forgiveness of sin, though, but because the sacrifices are such a part of Israel's, they're the law and et cetera, that perhaps God is creating for Israel the ideal temple that he wished they had, back before Nebuchadnezzar destroyed it in 586 BC. I don't know.
Kind of like a rewind, just going backwards.
Correct.
Eventually everything will be made perfect.
Yep. in Revelation 4:6, there are the 4 living ones that are above the throne. They may be cherubim. We just don't know. Before the throne, there was something like a sea of glass and crystal, and in the center and around the throne, 4 living creatures full of eyes in front and behind. I mean, they may very well be cherubim as well. Then you have also, besides the cherubim, you have seraphim, right? And the only place in the Bible that seraphim are referred to is in Isaiah chapter 6, verses 2 through 7. And that's in the place where seraphim stood above him, each having 6 wings. 2 covered his face, 2 covered his feet, 2 he flew. And one called out to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. That's the only place seraphim are referenced. And
what were the angels that sat on the Ark of the Covenant?
Cherubim, I think. Anyway, and we know there's more than one seraphim because the I am suffix in Hebrew is plural. So you have 1 seraph and 1 cherub, but you have 2 seraphim and 2 cherubim. In English, we used to add the S, lawyers, doctors, whatever, but there that's how the plural is described. And there also are particular angels that are mentioned. For example, you have we already talked about Michael and being the archangel, and then we have Gabriel. Gabriel is referred to in multiple places. We see him in Daniel 8:16, where Gabriel is told to go give this man an understanding of the vision. God sends Gabriel to tell Daniel what his vision really meant. You see him also in Daniel 9:21. Daniel says, while I was speaking in prayer, then the man Gabriel, whom I'd seen in the vision previously, came to me in my extreme weariness about the time of the evening offering. So you see him in Luke chapter 1, verse 19. The angel answered and said to him, I'm Gabriel, who stands in the presence of God. He's talking to Zacharias here. And I have been sent to speak to you and to bring you good news. And the good news is you're going to have a son. He'll be John the Baptist, and he will be the one who clears the way for Messiah. You have Luke 1:26, where Luke's a busy guy in the Christmas season, because in 1:26 he goes to Mary. Luke 1:26. And now in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city in Galilee called Nazareth. And there he appears to Mary and explains to Mary about what's about to happen. Strangely enough, also, in the Aramaic Targum, what's the Aramaic Targum, you say? The Aramaic Targum is a version of the Old Testament that's written in Aramaic. And Aramaic is essentially the quasi-Hebrew language of the time of Jesus. But by the time of Jesus, classical Hebrew had sort of devolved into a more colloquial way of speaking, in the same way that the King's English of Victorian England, or the Old Testament, or the King James Version of the Bible, for example, there's a very high English that's spoken of there, right? That's how it's written. We don't speak that English today, right? We speak something a little bit more common. And we have words that come into our vocabulary all the time. Email. That wasn't a word before 25 years ago. Anyway, but in the Aramaic Targum, there's a reference to Gabriel as the angel that found Joseph's brothers back in Genesis. He also talks about the burial of Moses. And also he was the angel who slayed the armies of Sennacherib when Sennacherib was invading the northern kingdom, and it was saved from destruction by angelic beings. Some angels have special responsibilities. For example, in Revelation 14:18, you have the angel with the power over fire, whatever that means. Also in what?
What did he have?
Angel in Revelation 14:18. I'll read it to you. Then another angel, the one who has power over fire, came out from the altar, and he called with a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, put in your sharp sickle and gather the clusters from the vine of the earth, because her grapes are ripe. So this angel has power over fire. But what's that look like? I have no idea.
Great TV show.
But you also have in Revelation 9:11, you have an angel of the waters, strangely enough.
Pokemon,
yeah. I'm sorry. Revelation 9:11. I'm sorry. Is the angel who has power over the abyss, where Satan and his angels are held during the
Which makes sense. They all have ranks.
yeah, the reference to the angel of the waters is in Revelation 16:5. Then I heard the angel of the waters saying, "Righteous are you," whatever that means. And then also you have an angel in chapter 20, verses 1 and 2 of Revelation. He's the guy who gets to go bind Satan and throw him into the abyss for the 1,000 years. So some angels have special responsibilities. Some of those responsibilities are fairly clear, guarding the abyss or binding Satan. Others, power of over fire and the angel of the waters, who knows what they do.
Is this for like the Greeks? Is there like
I
mythology
was
type
wondering
stuff?
about that. and all this.
That sounds very similar.
Yeah, the question was whether or not this has some similarities in terms of how Greek mythology had gods over certain areas, like Aphrodite being the goddess of love and Mars being the god of war. Maybe.
Sounds very similar.
It could be. So you also have angels that are very much associated with future judgments. In Revelations chapter 8 and 9, you have the angels sounding the trumpet for the breaking of the seventh seal, so that they sound the trumpet and God's judgment begins to happen in Revelation 8 and 9. And also in Revelation 16, angels are responsible for the 7 last plagues that are poured out on earth by the angels. Other areas of special responsibility are specific classes of angels. In Revelation chapter 2 and 3, you have the letters that are written to the church, the angels of the churches, the seven churches in southwestern Turkey. And each letter is addressed to an angel. To the angel at the churches at Ephesus, I write. Whether the reference to angel there is to an angelic being or to a man is uncertain. We don't know for sure, because remember, angel means messenger. And so sometimes you will translate it clearly as, in the Old Testament, men are referred to as angels, but they're clearly men who are just messengers. Go tell Moses this, or go tell Aaron this. So the angels, the 7 churches, may or may not be angelic beings. We just don't know for sure. But it could be, though. It might very well be. And for example, in Mark chapter 1 verse 2, and this is really just the beginning of the book of Mark, as it was written in Isaiah the prophet, "Behold, I send my messenger ahead of you who will prepare the way." That's clearly not a reference to an angelic being. It's a reference to John the Baptist. But the word is translated messenger in the New American Standard, because that's what he's supposed to do. We also have maybe the most famous angel of them all, not the most famous, but the one that the greatest angel is referenced is the angel of Yahweh, and we've talked about that before. And we'll talk about it in great detail here when we get to Christology. But the angel of Yahweh is a Christophany, or he's a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, and you can, because he identifies himself as God, he speaks for God, he exercises God's prerogatives. So Genesis chapter 16, verses 7 through 12, dealing with Hagar in the wilderness. Genesis chapter 21, verses 17 and 18, the angel of the Lord again dealing with Hagar. Genesis 22, 11 through 18, where the angel of the Lord is dealing with Abraham as he's about to sacrifice Isaac, and so on and so on and so on and so on. One of the interesting things about the angel of Yahweh, one reason we think that perhaps he is a pre-incarnate Christ is once Jesus actually comes, the angel of Yahweh doesn't show up anymore. He stopped. Although you find him in the Old Testament from Genesis 16 all the way up through Zechariah chapter 1 verse 12, 3 verse 1 and 12, 8. And Zechariah, although it's the next to the last book in our Old Testament order, Zechariah was the last book written in the Old Testament. So you have basically the angel of Yahweh bookends the Old Testament and then disappears from Scripture. Why? Because Jesus came. He's no longer pre-incarnate, he's incarnate, if that makes sense. So, ministry of angels, which I guess is kind of the last major topic here to cover. And you said I wouldn't get through it, Nina. Do what?
You skipped Lucifer.
I'm sorry. You're right. I certainly did. Hold on.
Yeah.
Let me back up and get Lucifer here. I wonder how I skipped him.
He was on a roll.
I was on a roll. I belted right through it. Oh, well.
We've already mentioned it.
We have. Yeah.
And you've already given references for it, but.
Don't know how I skipped him. Anyway, I don't see him in my notes either, although it's clearly in the text I'm looking at here. So this is the most important part of it. The ministry of angels. We already know that they're servants. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 14, referring to angels, are they not all ministering spirits sent out to render service for the sake of those who will inherit salvation? So one ministry of angels obviously is to serve us in some way that it's hard for us to understand, like what that really means. But so the ministry of angels in relation to God, Psalm 148 verses 1 and 2, they praise Him. Praise the Lord from heaven. Praise Him in the heights. Praise Him, all His angels. Praise Him, heavenly hosts. So praising God is one aspect of His ministry. And we saw that also in Isaiah 6:3, when the cherubim called out to one another and said, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God of hosts. The whole earth is full of His glory." Besides praising Him, they worship Him. Hebrews 1:6. And we again brings the firstborn into the world. He says, "Let all the angels of God worship Him." There it's referring to Jesus and God both. Revelations 5 verses 8 through 13. You have the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fall down before the Lamb and sing a new song. "Worthy are you to take the book and break its seals, for you were slain and purchased for God with your blood." Talking about Jesus there. And the angels there exalt the Lamb. They rejoice in what God has done. In perhaps the oldest book from the Old Testament. What's the oldest book in the Old Testament? Job, exactly. It's probably. And Job 38, verses 6 and 7, referring to angels, God says, on what basis, talking about the universe, on what were its bases sunk, or who laid its cornerstone, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. The morning stars are referenced obviously to angels. How do we know that? Lucifer was the morning star. Exactly, right. So they rejoice in God's creation. They exalt in it. They definitely serve Him. Yes, Dwayne.
Rejoicing. You remember back when you mentioned the fact that angels were confused or didn't know exactly how the Lord was going to save us?
1 Peter 1:12, correct?
Yeah. Well, I heard a preacher a long time ago, and it's still in my mind, saying that there's rejoicing among the angels in heaven when one of us is one again. Believe in the Lord. He explained it like the angels are bending over the banisters of heaven, looking over, saying, "How's He going to do it?" Ain't nobody going to believe that story. But when one does, when one of us repents and comes to the Lord, there's rejoicing among the angels in heaven. And I wondered if you were going to come up with, they rejoice with Him over one of us who was gone astray and now has come into the fold.
Great point. I didn't have that verse to teach that principle, but I can give you the verse now. It comes from Luke chapter 15, and you have where the parable of the sheep, the lost sheep. If you've got 100 sheep and you lose one, He leaves 99 to go find the one. And Jesus says, "I tell you, in the same way, there'll be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance." And then He says the same thing again in the following verses about the parable of the lost coin. Remember, a woman has 10 coins, she loses one, and she spends all her time trying to find the lost one. In the same way, I tell you, there's joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. So that's exactly where it comes from.
And He put the other stuff about the banisters of heaven. Well, there may be banisters in heaven, but we know.
And that's really a sobering thought, too, because if the angels are watching what we do, then we ought to be careful about what we do.
Right. Yeah. That's good stuff.
Well, our secrets are not really in secret. Correct. Yeah. The angels serve God. Psalm 103, verse 20. "Bless the Lord, you His angels."
They weren't omniscient, right?
Do what?
You did say the angels are not omniscient.
They're not omniscient, correct.
So they don't really know what we're thinking.
Yep, correct. They may, but I don't know.
What we're doing, but they don't know what we're thinking. Except by what we're doing, they probably know what
We're thinking, correct. The angels serve the Lord. Bless the Lord, you his angels, mighty in strength. You perform his word. So God speaks, and the angels go perform it. They go do what he tells them to do. See the same thing in Revelation chapter 22, verse 9. Also there. The angels appear before him. Job chapter 1, verse 6, you have, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan was among them. So there the reference to sons of God is to angelic beings, and Satan was there with them. You also have Job chapter 2, verse 1, basically the same thing. The sons of God came to present themselves to God, and Satan was with them. And here's a sobering thought too, and that's the angels are also instruments of God's justice, right? We saw that earlier in the Matthew 13 passage, where they're the ones who'll separate the sheep from the goats. But also in Revelation 7:1, you have an angel that's holding back the four corners of the earth, actually four angels, and they hold back the wind so that no wind will blow. So as God begins his final judgment on mankind in Revelation 7, the angels are involved in that process.
Did they hold back the water when Moses?
I don't know.
Say anything about that?
It does not, no.
Think about that.
I can't remember what verse it is, so you may have to help me find it. But there was one where it's kind of like you get like a sneak peek as to them being instruments of God's judgments. Where I think it was with Nebuchadnezzar, basically saying, or was it King Ahab? I think it might be King Ahab. Anyways, where basically it's like God's saying, it's time to do something about him. What's almost like the angels would do, like give their suggestions, I guess, and basically says, go do it. I'm going to be a ministering a lying spirit in his mouth. Something like that. I can't remember.
I'll have to find it. I'm not familiar with it.
Says, what you say is good, go and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember what it is.
and keep in mind here too, part of our theology is, part of it is that we have to understand that God's relationship with humanity has evolved over time. It's progressed. In the Old Testament, you have the Mosaic Law. New Testament, Jesus has a different system for relating to God. In the same way, you have angels involved in the epochs of Old Testament, New Testament history as they unfolded. For example, we looked at Job 38, verses 6 and 7. They joined in praise when the earth was created, right? The morning stars sing when God creates. But you also have from Galatians 3:19 and also Hebrews 2:2 that the angels were involved in the giving of the Mosaic Law. Interesting. Maybe I knew that. I just hadn't really thought about it, but they were part of the process. The angels were extremely active during the early years of the church. For example, in Acts chapter 8, verse 26, you have the angel of the Lord speaking to Philip saying, get up and go south to the road that descends from Jerusalem to Gaza, and there he meets the Ethiopian eunuch. So he sends Philip on a journey to meet a man to tell him about Jesus. And you also have in Acts chapter 10, verse 3, you have an angel of God waking up Cornelius. Cornelius has a dream. He's a Roman, and eventually Peter finds Cornelius. So you have angels involved in the church ministry. In chapter 12, verse 11 of Acts, you have Peter being thrown in jail for the second time. And how does Peter get sprung from jail? An angel lets him out, right? And angels will also be involved in the events surrounding the second coming of Christ. Matthew 25:31, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him. 1 Thessalonians 4:16, For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. So you have at least the archangel reference there. So angels were involved in creation. They're involved in giving the Mosaic Law. They were involved when Christ first came. Obviously, we've talked about that in terms of the birth narratives, appearing to Joseph, appearing to Mary, appearing to Zacharias. Also, in ministering to Jesus after his temptation, you have the angels involved in the early years of the church, and you have angels being involved in the future, things yet to come. So angels are involved in all times. in terms of the angel's involvement directly with relationship to the ministry of Jesus, you have, of course, the prediction of his birth in Matthew 1:20. Behold, when he had considered this, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him, a dream saying, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife. Also in Luke chapter 1, verse 26 through 28, you have the angel Gabriel appearing to Mary. Now in the 6th month of the angel, Gabriel was sent from God to a city in Galilee called Nazareth to a virgin engaged to a man whose name was Joseph. So they were involved in the prediction of his birth. You have angels involved in the announcement of his birth in Luke chapter 2, verses 8 through 15, where you have the story of the shepherds in the field and the flocks by night, and the angel of the Lord came and told them, and do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy, for which will be for all the people. For today in the city of David there has been born to you a Savior who is Christ the Lord. So angels were involved in not just the prediction of his birth, but also in the announcement of it. You have angels involved in the life of Jesus. For example, early on in his life, in Matthew chapter 2, verses 13 through 15, it's an angel who appears to Joseph. It says, get up and take your child and mother and flee to Egypt. That's because Herod's out to try to kill the baby Jesus. And so Joseph took the child and his mother while it was night and left and went to Egypt. You also have an angel directing the family to return to Israel after Herod died in Matthew chapter 2, verses 19 through 21. But when Herod died, behold, an angel appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, get up and take the child and his mother and go back into the land of Israel. So involved early on. You have him involved in the Jesus adult ministry. We've already looked at the Matthew 4, verse 11 verse, where then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and began to minister to him after the temptations. You have angels with Jesus when he's in Gethsemane on the night before the crucifixion in Luke 22:43. Now an angel from heaven appeared to him, meaning Jesus, and strengthened him. And then when Jesus is dealing with Pilate, and Jesus says, do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? So the angels were involved in the life of Jesus. You have, after the resurrection, angels being involved in the life of Jesus. Matthew 28, verses 1 and 2. Now after the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to look at the grave. And behold, a severe earthquake had occurred, for an angel of the Lord had descended from heaven and came and rolled the stone away and sat upon it. So it was an angel who opened the gate for Jesus to walk out of the tomb. You have angels involved in the announcement of the resurrection. Matthew 28, verses 5 and 6. The angel said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know you're looking for Jesus who has been crucified. He's not here, for he's risen. Just as he said, come and see the place where he was lying. And then again, also in Luke 24, verses 5 through 7, almost the same thing. Why do you seek the living one among the dead? He's not here, but he's risen. Remember how he spoke to you while he was still in Galilee. So, and finally, angels were involved in his ascension. Acts chapter 1, verses 10 and 11. There they're described as men, but they're obviously angels. And as they, meaning the disciples, were gazing intently into the sky while he was going, behold, meaning he was going, meaning Jesus was ascending, behold, two men in white clothing stood beside them. They said, men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into the sky? Jesus has been taken up from you into heaven, will come in just the same way as you watched him go into heaven. So they were involved at his birth, during his life, at his resurrection, and they will absolutely be involved in his second coming. The rapture itself will begin with the voice of the archangel, 1 Thessalonians 4:16. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel. At his second coming, he'll be accompanied by angels. Matthew chapter 25, verse 31. But when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him. Also 2 Thessalonians 1:7. Talking about the second coming, give relief to you who are afflicted, and to us as well, when the Lord Jesus will be revealed from heaven with his mighty angels in flaming fire. So, they were involved in all aspects of Jesus' life. In announcing his birth, in while he was growing up, they were with him during his life. They were with him after the resurrection, and they'll be with him at his second coming. I mean, the angels are throughout the Jesus story. Right. Absolutely. I hope that comes across well. In relation to the nations of the world,
Before you move on to that part,
Sure.
I found that verse that I was thinking of.
Okay.
It was 1 Kings 22, and it starts at 19.
1 Kings 22,
It
19.
goes to 22.
Let me get there real
I
quick.
can read it.
Okay, why don't you read it? Well, hold on, let me read it because that way it'll be on the tape. And Cody found the verse that he was referring to a minute ago in 1 Kings.
About the judge, they're instruments of God's judgments.
So we have another reference here. It's taking me a minute to get back to 1 Kings.
That was 1 Kings 22, 19 to 22. And it goes underneath that, number 6, which are the instruments of God's judgments on this handout.
1 Kings 19, verse 22. Let's find it here. Verse 19. Where am I? That's 19. I didn't go far enough. Sorry. Let me go. Here's what it says. So he departed from there and found Elisha. Is that what I'm reading?
That was 1 Kings 22.
Oh, 22. I'm sorry. I'm looking at 19.
It's
And it goes
chapter
to-
22.
Chapter 22, 19 to 22.
There we go. Okay. My bad.
Sorry.
Okay. Micaiah said, "Therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him on his right and his left. The Lord said, who will entice Ahab to go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said this while another said that. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord and said, I will entice him. And the Lord said, how? And he said, I will go out and be a deceiving spirit in the mouth of all of his prophets. Then he said, you are to entice him and also prevail. Go and do so. Exactly. There you go. There you go. Thank you, Cody. In relation to the nations of the world, you have, of course, the Archangel Michael, who in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, now at that time, Michael, the great prince, who stands guard over the sons of your people, meaning Daniel's people, who are the Jews. So Michael is the archangel. He's the one who guards Israel. So at least we have one angel identified specifically with protecting the country. And other nations, Daniel 4:17, this sentence is by the decree of the angelic watchers, and the decision is a command of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind, and bestows it on him who he wishes, and sets it over the lowliest of men. So it's Daniel 4:17, where the angels watch over the rulers and do what God tells them to do in terms of rising up or going down. You have the same. There's also angels influence human leaders. For example, in Daniel 10:21, Daniel's talking. However, I tell you that what is inscribed in the writing of truth, that there is no one who stands firmly with me, meaning Daniel, against these forces except Michael, your prince. So Michael's involved again there. May very well be that nations and people have angels that influence them. And we talked about this earlier in Revelation 8 and 9, and also in Revelation 16. Angels are involved in the administration of God's judgments. You know, the bowls and the wrath and the trumpets. As the 7 trumpets are sounded, as the angels are doing all the work. In relation to unrighteous people, angels announce impending judgment. Genesis 19:13, talking about Sodom and Gomorrah. In Revelation 14, verses 6 and 7, I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven, having an eternal gospel to preach to those who live on the earth, and to every nation and tribe and tongue and people, and said with a loud voice, fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. And then also in chapter 19, verses 17 and 18, then I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried out with a loud voice, saying to all the birds which fly in mid-heaven, come assemble for the great supper of God, so that you may eat the flesh of kings and the flesh of commanders and the flesh of mighty men. So they're involved in God's judgment. He's summoning the all these buzzards that fly out here by this cell tower down the road here. And we've already talked about this, but we can do it again. In Matthew 13, verses 39 and 40, in the parable of the wheat and the tares, as Christ is explaining what the parable means. The enemy that sowed them, meaning the tares, is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. So just as the tares are gathered up and burned with fire, so shall it be at the end of the age. The angels will gather them up, unrighteous, and take them to the heavenly fire. And so the angels' ministry in relationship to the church. We've already looked at Hebrews 1:14. They're here to help believers. They're ministering spirits sent to render service for those sake of those who will inherit salvation. We've talked about this a little bit, but angels have been involved in communicating and revealing the meaning of truths, which we benefit from. Daniel 7, verses 15 through 27, where Gabriel goes and explains to Daniel what his vision means. We benefit from that because we also learn what the vision meant as well. Daniel 8, verses 13 through 26, basically the same thing. Gabriel helps Daniel interpret the vision. Chapter 9, verses 20 through 27. Again, Daniel's praying, and Gabriel comes and answers his prayer. And we benefit from him because the answer that Daniel gets, we get the same answer because it's written down. You have the whole book of Revelation is really communicated to John through the ministry of an angel. For example, Revelation 1:1, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his bondservants, the things which must soon take place, and he sent and communicated it by his angel to his bondservant John. So the book of Revelation, an angel is John's guide to seeing the future, writing it down and communicating it to us. So we benefit from this revelation. But there are also specific ministries that the angels are involved in. For example, Acts chapter 12, verses 5 through 10, where Peter is kept in prison, and the church is praying for him to be let out. And in the process, verse 7 of Acts 12, behold, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared in a light shown in the cell, and he struck up Peter's side, woke him up, and said, "Get up quickly." And his chains fell off his hands. And the angel said, "Gird yourself and put on your sandals." And he did so, and they walked out with the door wide open. So God sent an angel to rescue Peter from prison. The angels also observe what happens here on earth. This is Paul in 1 Corinthians 4:9. I think God has exhibited us apostles, last of all, as men condemned to death, because we become a spectacle to the world, both to angels and to men. The angels are watching what the apostles do. Is it true of us as well? Probably. In 1 Corinthians 11:10, Paul's talking about women and how they should dress in church. He says a woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. Well, we don't really practice that here by women having a shroud on or a head covering, but the reason, what? That women should not have their head uncovered in church because of the angels. The angels are watching. So there's what that means. I don't know. I don't know.
I've heard a crazy theory. I can tell you later if you want to hear it. Okay.
And the church here, Ephesians 3:10, talks about the manifold wisdom of God might now be made known through the church to the rulers and authorities in the heavenly places. What we do, carrying out Jesus' commands, being his hands and feet and speaking his words, it's revealed and made known to angelic beings in the heavenlies. And we've also looked at 1 Peter 1:12, where the gospel was preached to us by the Holy Spirit from heaven, things that angels wanted to see but didn't get a chance to see until the full revelation of Jesus had come. Angels encourage people in times of danger. In Acts 27, verse 23 and 24, while Paul is on the way to Rome, for this very night, an angel of the Lord, to whom I belong and whom I serve, stood before me, saying, "Don't be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all those who are sailing with you." So, grant safety to all those who are sailing with you. So, as the ship's about to go down, an angel appears to Paul and encourages him, and Paul in turn shares that information and encourages other people as well. And actually, there's also a verse that suggests that angels also take care of the righteous at the time of their death. You have Luke chapter 16, verse 22, when you have the rich man and Lazarus, right? Now the poor man died and was carried away by the angels to Abraham's bosom, and the rich man also died and was buried. So if Jesus is describing something that really happened, when the poor man died, it was the angels took him to Abraham's bosom, whatever that is, I guess. And here's a question. This is a good way for us to kind of end, I think. And that is, do angels continue to function in all these ways today? And
They have no reason to believe that they don't.
correct. Nothing says they don't. Nothing exactly says that they do either. Exactly. And I think that in some Christian denominations, angels take on an importance that's probably disproportionate to what the Scripture really teaches. Should we pray to an angel? Don't need to. Because why not go right to God through Jesus? I mean, we wouldn't want. You don't need to. Angels can't do anything for you because angels are only serving God and doing what God tells them to do.
Yeah, they're a helper.
So exactly. So I assume that angels still minister today the way they have in the past. Can I prove it from a Bible verse? No. But as you said before, Cody, there's no Bible verse that says they don't. They're stopped.
And we know they're going to do something in the future as well.
Correct. So this would be a weird time if you have angels involved in everything up until the church age, and then they aren't involved anymore. So I think they probably are. Can I find them and see them and determine their work? I can't, or haven't anyway. But Davis Nutt has. You want to tell your story now, Dwayne?
Oh, well,
Let me come down there with my recorder so you'll be on the.
it's not a.
I'll come to you.
Okay. Davis is being treated for squamous cell carcinoma in her right leg. It won't heal. She went through all of the deals that Dr. Biltz did, and now he referred her to the cancer clinic for the radiation treatments. And she's been going every day for the last 30 days. Well, will be 30 the end of the month. And she was in there the other day. I think this is Saturday. I think it was Thursday she was in there and laying on the table. And the nurse that was tending to her went outside to push the button or whatever it was. And Davis said, I always lay on the table with my eyes closed. And so Davis was laying there with her eyes closed, and then all of a sudden she saw this lady come up to her, and the old lady, said, she didn't say it looked like her granny, but she interpreted it as it could have been Granny. But she said that the lady just appeared to her, smiling, reached down, touched her shoulders this way, and kissed her on the cheek. There was no conversation or anything, but just kissed her on the cheek. And Davis looked up to see who it was, and is gone. So she says that's my interpretation of how the angels watch over me.
There you go. Okay, so
Well, you've got to know that the angels are still acting today because they were in the New Testament. They opened the chains off of that. The people, Paul, whoever, I can't remember.
Peter.
Peter. So I can't imagine that you hear all
They have no reason to concoct those for their,
No.
their own benefit.
yeah. So I guess being practical. So what's our takeaway about the angels? I guess we just are thankful that God ministers to us the way He ministers to us, and if He takes care of us through the ministry of angels, then we're just thankful for it, right?
Well, and we're in their world apparently, because if they have charge of it, we need to go to the person who can help us, because he's able to combat that. And we have these things, then we need to run them, because obviously this is more powerful than we can understand.
Correct. And I think that we can also, besides being thankful to God for how He ministers to us, we can also be thankful that, as you said, the power of Christ in us empowers us in a world that's controlled by an adversary who would do us harm. So we can be thankful about that also. And also, I mean, from a common sense standpoint, a couple of times I've seen somebody look at me with such rage in their eyes. I mean, I just felt like they wanted to kill me, or he did. And it almost seemed like there was some supernatural conviction in him because of the way his eyes were just, I mean, he was so mad at me, so mad that he wanted to do me great harm. And was that, a spiritual influence? Could have been. So anyway.
Joel, have y'all seen that in your part of the world? Angels?
Yes.
Any stories?
I have I'm not said this here, but I've told this to the so whenever we go to the village and when we get back home, we hear certain incidents taking place. Since the village is like a jungle area, they could, what could be, we could have been in that place, but others we had. Whenever we get back home, we see in the newspaper reading this place was a panther or a tiger or some kind of animal just took the baby from the house and just killed the baby, or the baby is lost, something like that. So, which we could have been in that place, but we're not there.
Okay.
Or somebody or wherever the family that we go stay with in the village, they could have been harmed or something would have happened to them, but that doesn't happen to them, but somebody else is getting trapped.
Yeah.
Protecting.
Yeah, and your dad tells a story also about going into a village. And the villages there, I mean, they're not just like 50 or 100 people. The villages are much bigger than that, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Trevor says that he can walk into the village and be 5 foot into the village, and the people on the other side of the village, 300 yards away, already know he's there. How's that happening? I remember Michael Hewitt told a story when he was in Uganda. They stayed at a certain place, and then they drove some distance to little villages to minister. And he said that every day that they would leave their place and they'd be on the way, and there'd be some crazy witch doctor out in the middle of the road that they'd never seen before, but would be screaming and hollering curses at them. I mean, so how'd the witch doctor know what they were there? I mean, how do you know? I mean, he never seen Michael before. He didn't know that the guy was there. Well, obviously, there's some spiritual influence that informed him that Jesus people were in the area, and he knew which car to scream at and holler at. Yeah, you can ask Michael next time you see him about it. It's a pretty interesting story. So anyway, well, thank you for coming. Merry Christmas, and that's our angel story.